Hello and welcome to the next episode of Advanced Blueprint Tutorials. I've switched the engine version to 4.25.2, so we are working at the newest, most up-to-date stock engine version. And today we are making a full circle back to the first tutorial when I just went through the character class and we made a deep dive into what character class can do. And we are doing the same again with one of the most important classes you will work with in multiplayer games in Unreal Engine ever, which is the game mode. We'll also discuss sessions and general game life cycle and all the objects that are linked to the game mode. So in today's lesson, we'll discuss game mode functions and events, sessions, game state, player controller, player state, observer pawn, game instance, and we are not covering in this tutorial how we should set up the dedicated server setup and how to test dedicated server, because that's a completely different set of shoes, because most dedicated servers, they have a execution string that already loads map with all the parameters of a map and all the general parameters of the match, but this is something we'll softly touch. So let's jump into it. Here's the project. You know the project already. I've added a new gameplay folder which is called Sessions, and you can see here there is a lot more than we usually do. Like the most was 3, I guess. And now we have 8 objects, and we'll have to discuss all of them. It will be very hard to discuss just what game mode does without touching other objects. So sorry if it will be confusing, but we will have to jump from one object to another. I also added very small functionality to our example blueprint interface, but I will discuss that while doing it. And maps, I've added sessions folder, and we have session start and gameplay map. So session start map is just this. It is absolutely empty because we want this map to load immediately, to not have anything that would be in any way heavy. Our session start game mode, we can look at it here, what it does. And what it does very little. This is something I was testing for dedicated server, if dedicated server could create a session, but unfortunately it is impossible, as create session object requires a player controller, and dedicated servers, they don't have a player controller. There's one very important fact about using sessions as they are shipped with the engine. I don't understand why. This is, half of the year 2020, and the engine version is 4.25, and still a lot of sessions functionalities are not exposed to blueprints. If you want to work in blueprints, you need to get the free advanced sessions plugin that you can download from the Unreal Engine forums. But for now, this simply doesn't work, so it doesn't matter. The game mode doesn't do anything except setting the default values. So, for example, we do not have a pawn at all, and we have almost everything as default, except for the player controller, which is here, and this is the session start player controller. And what this player controller does is on begin play, just in case if we forgot to set it up in the default values, we are showing the mouse cursor, we are creating a widget, and we are adding this widget to our screen, and then we are executing command to cut our FPS at 60, because we will be running multiple windows and I don't want my graphic card to just boil when running 4 instances of the game. Okay, so let's look into the UI, as obviously there's nothing more happening here, and the UI is taking the heavy lifting of the main menu. So basically this level and everything you have in it would be the main menu of the game. Here you would set up settings, you would set up values like the mouse sensitivity, going into single player or multiplayer, and things would happen once you trigger any buttons that would take you somewhere else. So what you have here, yeah, save. It's just this, so we have a host button and a join button, and there's nothing more. And they are just stock buttons, and we can go see what they do. So let's go through create session. So first, if we do create, on click, very important. First of all, we are getting the owning player, which is basically the same as get player controller 0, because player controller 0 is the local player controller. But yeah, because the widgets are always local, I'm just getting owning player, as this node is easier to call from a widget. And then on this owning player controller, we are destroying the session. We are destroying the session just in case that we have a valid session that was interrupted in any way. So, for example, we joined a game and the host of the game left the game. When he left the game, the session was disrupted and we all get disconnected. But getting disconnected doesn't really mean that the session that we are at is, no longer existing. It actually still is there, and we can still actually even refer to that object. And we have a window of, I think, 300 seconds by default to reconnect to the same session and get the same player state and just reconnect and pick up where we left if we had internet problem. The thing is that if someone destroyed a session by leaving the game, we don't know that the session is no longer valid. So just in case we are destroying the session, and if it is successful, or it is not valid, so it fails, it doesn't matter, then we can create a session, which is a new session. And then we can make a number of public connections, let's say only 4 players, and use LAN, and if it's not triggered, it means we're using the internet, and that's it. And create sessions. We're not using Steam networking. There's multiple, I mean really multiple tutorials on using Steam. And using Steam sessions it's quite similar, but I didn't want to use Steam because I wanted to be able to test this game locally. So I made this bat executable, which is just the editor, then the project with the game and no Steam commands, which means that it's running without the Steam subsystem as a full-fledged game. So it's running as standalone game in completely new process, which is also important because we don't want to run multiple windows on single process. Okay, so after creating session, we're just printing a string that we're opening a new session. On failure, we saying that something went wrong and we cannot create session. For example, if we have a connection problem, connection to the internet problem, but we can handle those failures in the game instance, and we'll go into it in a second. But we create session, it takes some time to create it, and on success, we open level gameplay map, which is our second level in sessions, which is a copy of the third person map with a very slight modification. With the option listen. Listen means that we are opening a port. The default port is, I think, 27777 or just 4 sevens. And we are listening on this port for any connections. So when someone is trying to run join session, he's communicating through his firewalls, his internet connection to this default port as well, and we cannot change the port unless we use advanced sessions. But we don't need to. This entire setup was tested and it works. Then we open the level and we remove all widgets because the main menu widget has to be removed, and if we have any other widgets like options or anything like that, we have to remove all of them. And that's it. That's the create session, and we can start offline, 1 player, yes, save, and let's click host, and boom, we have info that we run the command, opening session, server player joined. Okay, this is the standard notification we get from sessions, basically. Server batch state waiting to start. This is a notification I am printing out, and I will show you what does it mean later on. But what we know now, that if we start session, we open a port we listen for connections, and we load a map. Okay, and it works. We stop, we are back in the session start. I pick very light map, so it loads really fast. And there is another thing for this setup. I made a setup with only 2 maps, but there is a possible setup with 4 maps actually, and we'd have to do 2 more maps. One would be a transition map for seamless travel, and what seamless travel is that when your lobby map is full of players and you are ready to start the match, you are streaming in a new level, and the transition map is the map that you are streaming in first. Then you are unloading the previous level, and then you are loading the new level. And in this way, you don't have those mini disconnections, you don't have pauses when joining some session, and you can constantly give a notification to players like assets loading, a loading screen, anything you like. And it's a single flow. And we would have to have a lobby map and then the gameplay map itself that would go with this fluent transition. Now, I am not using this setup because I really like the setup where you are loading the entire gameplay map before you start the match itself, because one of the things, it makes sure that every player loads to the map, every player is ready, and every player has all the assets that are in the editor already loaded in the memory and ready for replication. And it doesn't matter if someone has fast internet connection or slow, everyone will start the match at the same time because they are all already on the map. So I like this setup a lot more, and we'll go into how it works. But let's get back to the UI, and let's see what happens when we click the join button. When we click the join button, we're doing the same. We are destroying any session that we might have in our memory, and then we are doing the find session node, which is, well, similar to create, destroy, and all others. We'll discuss all the nodes with sessions later on. And we are also pushing the player controller. We specifying how many results we want to check. 0 means that we are scanning constantly for new ones, and we are trying to get all of them that we can find. But let's say it's even 10, doesn't really matter. And on success, it's giving us an array, and this is an array of sessions reference objects. And then we are checking if we have any number of servers, printing it out. We're doing a lot of debug prints. They're very important for this thing because a lot of things can go wrong. And on success, we are printing that we found a server. And then for each and every one of those, we are going through the loop. And in the loop, we are printing information about the server, and we are getting from this session node, we can read many values. One of them is the server name, and to be able to change the server name, you have to use advanced sessions. It will be in the create advanced session node, but if you're not using it, the server name is the name of the computer that you're on, the system name, and it adds a GUID, which is a random string of signs that are just so incredibly random that they are almost guaranteed to be unique. Other things you can read is the ping to the server, the current players that are on the server right now, and max players. And that's all you can read, all those 4 values, and that's it. So we're just getting servers with ping lower than, let's say 200, and we that have less players than max players, which means that servers that are not full that we can actually connect. And then we're making this format text. We are pushing all those values to this format text. And how format text works is that you specify those clamps, and I can do, for example, another clamp 4, but it can be 45 as well, doesn't matter, and clamp, enter, and it adds 45. It's a wildcard. Wildcard means that it can take multiple types. It can take a boolean, it can take an integer, it can take text, it can take, string, it can take float, and some other functions. It can even take a vector. Okay, but we don't need anything more. We do a printout of this text, and then we're doing a branch. So if we found a server that is not full and this ping is acceptable, then we are taking this array and saying join session, and this is another node that takes time. And what we should do is actually not on success, but just on execution. We print that we are joining already. It's a process. It can take like a half of second or 1 second or whatever. And yeah, on success we could debug another string, but doesn't matter. On failure, we might want to print also a debug string like this. And then we are setting like, yeah, we found a server, remove all widgets, and stop looking for new servers. We do not need another server. This one is fine. And on completed, because once we do that, this will still trigger, because before this triggers and we move to the another map, because this actually loads the map that is on the server, and it loads the map basically taken as a reference from the server, and then setting all the replicated actors from the server and doing a lot of stuff that is just embedded in the engine, and you don't have to worry about it. And then when it's completed, we're just saying that, yeah, we found the server. If we found a server, so if we set this to true, and not if we haven't found anything, we found a server, yay! And server sweep completed, found server, or server sweep completed, no valid servers. And that's it, and we print out. So if we go through entire array and we never found a server that meets our criteria, we'll be notified that it didn't work, and we can click the find servers again. And sometimes you will have to find multiple times your own server locally. Because you are connecting through the internet, which means that there is a lag potential. You are not connecting through your local network interface. You are connecting through the outside network, and it's going through the Epic Games servers, matchmaking services. So yeah, you can have a ping something between, I don't know, I personally had ping from 4 up to 200. So it depends. And that's all it does. So let's just show how it works. We're clicking join, searching, and nothing happened. And servers we completed, no valid servers. Found 0 servers. That is correct, my sir. You have found 0 servers because we haven't set up any of them. However, if we go into, I think it was project settings. Okay, so this is the ID of our project, and this is basically being used to locate sessions of our game in the matchmaking services. So as long as we keep this project ID and general file references doesn't change, we can compile the same project for multiple platforms, and they will be cross-platform by default. You don't really have to do much more than that if you are not using Steam, because you know, the Epic services, they are taking care of the rest. And it is very simple to do a project that would run on mobile and on PC as well. You just would have to have different setups for you know, packaging settings. So you know, you don't package ray tracing, and don't even try to package too much PC quality into Android build, but you could have proper setting in the materials and in everything, that it takes the platform you're on, and you know, appointing proper materials depending on the platform, and the build would extrude all materials that are not being used, and the game would still be the same game and would have the same project ID, and it would work cross-platform. However, whenever you make any changes to the game and you are recompiling the game, because project ID, I think it's not the only thing that matters. I think there is also a build ID, which is not here. Okay, never mind at this point. There is also a build ID, so it is checking the version of the game. If you are running the same version. So if you, for example, make a build that is just packaged for Windows, and run it and host a session, you can join the same session from the editor. as a client. It is possible. However, if you change any blueprints, recompile and resave it, you will no longer be able to join. But as long as you don't make changes, actually a full packaged game is compatible with editor, and it's compatible with editor running as a game. It doesn't really matter. Okay, getting back here, we know that how joining works, but let's see how it will work if we run this in two windows. Or you know what? I will even close this one. One of those goes nowhere. Host. Okay, we just host it, and here we'll run in editor and join. And okay, found the server joining. And let's see what else did it tell us. It's telling us that the server is desktop G404 HQ4, which is, I don't know, my motherboard probably. And then I GUID, which is, I think, the game version actually. Project settings. Let's see. No, I think not, after all. No, it's different. So there's just a random GUID, then it says ping 8. Okay, that's a very good ping. I have a very slow internet connection here. And current players is 1/4 before we joined, obviously, and now it's 2/4. And then it says joining and server sweep completed, found server. Yes, you did, sir, and it's working. So there you go. And stop. And here on the server, we see player joined, match state, waiting to start. And it's saying that desktop G404 HQ4 1644. That's probably the name of our guy. And we're saying, player joined. And that's it. And why it's posting 2 times, I don't know. We'll see later on. It's saying 2 times because once it's us, our default name of the server, and second time this is the default name of the player. We'll have to probably set a better default name, but we can change our name to server, for example, and we actually change name. I will show how to do that as well. Okay, close this one. So we got this covered. Like, this is the main menu. In the main menu, you can do a lot of stuff, load options, customize your character, prepare yourself for the gameplay, set up your avatar, set up your network name, all that. And how we would store it, we'll store it probably in a save game file. I'm not a big fan of using game instance as the ultimate universal storing device. And then once we join a game, we would, from our controller, load those data, push it to game mode, and from game mode, the game mode would deal with the replication and setting our game state. Because the game state and player state should, it doesn't have to, but should be managed by the game mode itself. Okay, let's now go and talk about project settings, maps and modes. And there are two important things. So default maps, you have the editor startup map and the game startup map. And the game startup map is important because that's the default map you will open once you run with this game. So if you don't set it up to something you want to be start of your game, and this is, by the way, also true for the compiled version, the build, it will always load the default game map as your first map. But the editor startup map might be the map that you're working the most and you want it to be automatically loaded when you come back to your work every day. And yeah, that's it. And the default mode is only being set up if in the map you haven't specified any. If you set none, it's not none. It can't be none. Game mode is the most important object when it comes down to your entire, life cycle of a game. So it's never empty. It will actually be the default game mode, which is game mode, which derives from game mode base. And it just have some, default stuff. And as it is set up and you don't have any pawn to control, it would actually spawn you a spectator pawn, which has the default input, so W, S, A, and D for movement and mouse input, and it overrides any input that you have on the project. So whatever you specified here, it doesn't matter, it gets override. And yeah, but this is all connected to the game mode itself. So you can't change those values here, you can just change the game mode, but there's one more very important actor here, which is the game instance. And how game instance class works is that once you run the game, the execution file, and it starts, no matter what map, no matter what game mode, no matter what you do, it will always create a game instance object. And the game instance object is never despawned, never decreated. It's not part of any map. It's a very special object that always exists on your memory and is always relevant only to you. Every instance of the game is running their own game instance and it is not replicated in any way, just like HUD is not replicated for anyone. This is the same. And this is a very good place to store anything that is persistent from map to map. You can save and load values inside a game instance, and whatever variables you set up in here, it works basically like a save game object. However, it is being destroyed, completely wiped out when you close the game. So let's look into our game instance, and we have some stuff here. So let's discuss what we are doing here. Okay, only game instance have those special events, which is the event network error and event travel error. And the network error is just a handler which has a network failure enumeration type, on which you can do a switch to different behaviors to check what's going on with your game. So for example, you made an entire day of coding, you made your game mode, you made your session states, you made, you know, everything, and you run it and it just doesn't work, and you have no idea why it doesn't work. Then you make a print string on every of those, and he says that, hey, NetDriver already exists, saying, hey, NetDriver create failure. If the NetDriver create failure, then you can go into log and see what happens, and it might say that the firewall blocked the connection to the internet, or for example, you are trying to use Steam, but you haven't set up Steam correctly in the ini files, and some other things can happen, like connection loss to the internet, connection timeout, this is the package loss. Um, Pending connection failure is the people who are trying to connect to you when you are a server and they are losing connection on your fault. Net GUID mismatch is, like I said, the GUID of the build of the game. So it's checking if you are connecting to the proper game, so you most likely have the same assets in your library. But yeah, actually, if you still have the same net GUID, if you have the same net GUID, you could even make the game so that different players have different assets with the same names and they would load different models, for example. Um, and yeah, you just have to go through all of them and see what is not working. And also the outdated client and outdated server, like I said, it is checking for latest compilation of the project, and if you have any modification, it's saying that either the server is older than your client or your client is outdated in compared to the server. And then there is the travel error, and the travel error is loading levels. So like I said, when you find a session and you join session, what's happening, you are loading the map of the server. Wherever the server is, you are loading the map, the level of the same name, and the server and the game mode has total authority over the map and replication. So you have errors that no such level. So for example, someone haven't changed the game, but when they try to package the project, and you go to package settings, they might, for example, forget to put a list of maps to include in this package build, and they simply haven't included the maps that are absolutely necessary for this to play out. And you suddenly are loading a map that doesn't exist in your build, and your NetGUID works fine, your client is not outdated, everything is fine except that there is no level. And you don't recompile anything, you don't make any changes. It is the same game. It just you screwed up the packaging of the game, and that was an error. And this is the way to debug it. And trust me, when you are building a game like a battle royale or multiplayer co-op like Left 4 Dead, you will have to handle all of those events, all of those failures, because they just happen, and you have to know that they happen. And the best way to do it, by the way, is also to not only handle them locally, but to report them to some database or game analytics. There are wonderful plugins for that that I will discuss in future tutorials. How to collect anonymous data about crashes of your game, about balance issues, about how fast people complete levels, what ability is the most used ability among all players, and just collecting anonymous data that obviously consensive um, data that can help you improve on your game and get rid of all the errors. So you can, for example, get game bundle ID, which is the game platform specific bundle identification of the game. You can get the get ID GUID. Okay, and you can print out information. You can compare versions of the game. I'm pretty sure that you can read all those values that you have in the project settings. I don't want to check how they're named right now, but there are already standard library that allows you to read properties of a game, and there are also free plugins that are exposing a lot more of those values, so you can read them in blueprints. Because you can read and write and do anything in C++, but when it comes down to blueprints, while doing this tutorial, I found that there is a lot really lacking. Okay, and then, oh, this is really cool. You can check if a project has a persistent download directory, and you can get the persistent download directory information. And this is a directory that you can download gameplay items, like for example, any data storage objects. So, for example, table of all weapons, table of all enemies, and they can be stored in objects in a special download directory. And those objects, they do not count as recompiling the project, and you don't have to rebuild the project. So you can have a game that allows you to re-download updates. One of the games I'm playing is, for example, Magic the Gathering Arena, and it has a downloader of new cards, new game modes, new assets directly built in into a game. It's not built in into a launcher, it's built in into a game, and you don't have to update the game updates itself when you run it. So this is one of the ways you can do it. Okay, and let's discuss other events that you have only in game instance. So for example, you have the event init. Init means that you started the game as a whole. You run the project, the entire, the main map. You start the game, and you can start a timer. You can do analytics on it. You can do some other stuff. You can, for example, load ini files, and you can check settings in those ini files if they are valid, or you can load your last you can, for example, go into Steam Cloud and load your settings like mouse sensitivity and other things you set up on a different machine and stored it in a cloud service. You can, if you are using GameSpark, for example, you can init the GameSpark system right here, so you can start the entire network layer, so you can work on it in other objects. And closing, event shutdown, it runs always, even if the game actually even tries to crash, unless it crashed beyond any repair. So this is an object that you are saving to cloud services. You are, saving to ini files. You are cleaning up anything that you have. If you, for example, were downloading something and it is being postponed, you might want to do some cleanup and put a marker that you downloaded those 4 files, and those 6 files need to be re-downloaded once you reopen the project. Do stuff like that. Okay. And there is this really cool thing, get command line, and the command line is the command line that the game was launched with, and you can just get it. So for example, it was launched with game server log and some custom commands. You can get those commands and you can do something with them and read them, and you can utilize them because they are just a string. Like custom commands, they don't do anything unless you allow them to do it. So we'll talk about that later in the game mode. And I wanted to discuss the cheat manager. So every player controller has a cheat manager. This is a standard object that is not part of a game mode. It's being specified just like player camera manager is being specified inside player controller, so does the cheat manager. And there is a default cheat manager for every controller, and cheat manager is not being built and shipped with the game if um, if you package, where's the package settings? If you package for, yeah, here. So most games actually being shipped in the development well, not debug, usually development configuration. And development configuration contains just some of the engine usabilities. For example, it contains the console. If you ship into shipping, the entire package of your game will be a lot smaller. It will actually run faster and more smooth. However, it will be less resistance to crashes, because anything that was a warning in your game in development mode crashes shipping, and everything that was an error doesn't allow you to, it will also crash development and it will crash shipping, but anything, the smallest things will crash shipping. And shipping runs faster, it works better, but it has the cutoff of console. It doesn't contain the cheat manager, and it doesn't contain some other functionalities. And games like, for example, Conan Exiles, they're actually being shipped in the development mode. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with shipping your game, even published on Steam, in build configuration development. Really, there's not. But if your game is well tested and well polished, and you are sure that everything is working, and you are a serious studio, and you have testing department, then you should ship it in shipping. Honestly, like you don't need anything more after the game is absolutely finished. So what the cheat manager does, it can, for example, do the function change size. And change size, like all those functions, they're checking what you are looking at. And what you are looking at is no, not this one. It's get character. Okay. It's taking the eye height of a character, or any object that is being possessed by this controller or the controller itself. So it's taking the active camera from the camera manager, and it is just doing a line trace that is, I think, blocked by oh my god, I think it's being blocked by visibility, and you just aim at something with your camera and then you run the cheat function and it will do what it does. So for example, this one changes the size of an object, and you can scale the objects times 1, but you can scale the objects times 100 and it will just do it. It will just scale the objects you're looking at. You can deal damage directly, and because like why this should be swapped with your own cheat manager that doesn't allow any of this is that this, I think, could be accessible in multiplayer, and someone could use the cheat manager to deal damage without having authority, because this would execute an authority damage dealing. So you have to watch out about that, because you have a backdoor in the game that you don't even know about. And you can damage the target just for testing purposes. You don't have to, make your own projectiles. So in a very fast game, when you need to check if someone is receiving damage, you could just do like, pressing pressing a key, and you just deal damage to whatever you're looking at, and you can test it. You can do destroy target, which is just destroying the actor, and God. God means that the possessed character that you have cannot be destroyed, basically. So if you have a death sequence that in the end destroys your actor and you get a new actor, no, it's not going to happen. You are just invulnerable. And your actor cannot be damaged. It doesn't receive any damage from the damage interface. It doesn't matter if you push it through cheats or you push it through the standard damage interface. It doesn't receive damage and it can't be destroyed. You have the teleport, and the teleport is teleporting you in straight line exactly at the point you are looking at, and it's just trying to put you as close to that point as possible. And it works a bit similar to the teleportation movement of the virtual reality default pawn. You have the enable debug camera and disable debug camera. Okay, so switch controller to debug camera without. Okay, so you're basically unpossessing your character, and you can do a free flying, and you can look how your character acts, how your animations looks in third person in a first person game, or you can, see if some actors that are hidden but need to be moved in a specific order because of a puzzle or something, if they are actually doing the thing while playing the game. And then you disable the debug camera and you go back to your possessed pawn. And this doesn't unpossess really; it just switches camera. I don't really know. It's probably one of the functions of the camera manager. And then you have fly, ghost, and walk. So basically, walk, it doesn't put you into walking, it just deactivates those modes. That's it. Ghost is flying, but you also clip through every possible collision with your character, and you can go in any direction. And flying means that you will start flying with a, I think, 3000 move speed in any direction you want. It doesn't matter how your movement component is being set up, but you still obey the rules of the world, so you still cannot clip through objects. But Ghost allows you to. And Walk puts you back into your normal mode. Then you have Freeze Frame. And Freeze Flame. Okay, it just pauses the game for some delay in seconds, and that's it. And player only. Okay, player only means that you are freezing the entire level, so you're putting the time dilatation on everything to 0, while the player is unaffected. So it's just per actor dilatation 1. And slomo is just time dilatation, basically, but it's in a cheat format function. That's it. It doesn't change anything. It's a global time dilatation. So this is the standard cheat manager. It's actually pretty useful. I never thought about using it when building examples, but you know what? In one of the next videos, we'll use this cheat manager to very quickly prototype and test some behaviors while I'm doing the recording live. And yeah, I see it might be very useful, and I don't have to make those functions myself. So that saves you some time. And yeah, to discuss this is what the game instance does. This was a small derivative because it's part of the player controller, but I put everything here as an example because I think it's just cool and it's worth mentioning. So yeah, remember to handle those two events, and well, there's not much more to it. Those are the only two functions you can override in the game instance, and that's it. Okay, let's save this. This was the game instance. It's handling the errors. This is the UI. It's handling the sessions. This is the player controller for start, and this is the start game mode. Okay, so we discussed this. Let's go into maps and let's see what's happening here because that will be a lot. Okay, this is the map. Here we have one player start, and by the way, watch out because on some levels, like this level, this player start, it has a scale of 0.1 on X. I have no idea why, but when you spawn a player character here with this as a scale, it will completely break your movement, it will break your camera, it will break everything. Remember to keep the scale in 111 and you know, just check it out if it's like this. So here's one player start, and it has PlayerStart Actor. It has one extra thing that other actors don't have. Player start tag. So we made a Team B. Yay, go Team B. And here we have another one that is also facing the wall, and it says Team A. Yay, go Team A. And there's a, I think, third one that we didn't use in the end, but we could. It's at an angle. We want it to be just looking at the entire map, and it says spectator start. But apparently the spectator functionalities, they're not fully exposed to blueprints, which was a major letdown and disappointment for me. I will have to check advanced sessions, but I don't think they cover things like that. And yeah, like you can't even check, you can't change that player controller is a spectator or not at runtime from blueprints. It's a read-only value. You'd have to make a player controller class in C++ that goes from player controller. You would have to expose this value into blueprints, compile, and then make a blueprint object from that C++ class, but we're not going to do that. So we already discussed this and this and this. So you got those 5 left, and that's gonna be a lot. Let's go into word settings and let's go yeah, let's see at the default values. So default value, default pawn is just the top-down character. It's the same character we're using in the top-down example. The player controller is the session player controller, and it's a bit different. We're not using like this is just copied from the top-down controller. This is copied from nothing. This is just the new UI for the lobby UI that we have, and we'll go into this with details in a second as well. And yeah, in this player controller, except for copying stuff from the previous controller, and obviously in the default we need to see our mouse for the top-down view, so we also change show mouse cursor, and that's it. Yeah, we have this event and this event. So this is the only function I added to the interface. It's saying event try set name, like try. We don't know if it will work, but it will, so don't worry. And what we do, we push to the event running on server. So player controller, it exists on the owner and the server only. You cannot do any you know, if you have a custom event, you basically can put it to multicast, it will not work. It will only work on server, on only client, or non-replicated. So no multicasting here, it won't work. You cannot pass a reference to player controller, and you cannot read the player controller anywhere else than the server itself. So player controllers are being managed in the game mode. They're being managed in the game mode because the game mode exists only and always on the server. So we have a guarantee that game mode has authority over the map, over player controllers, states, pounds, and basically the entire game and life cycle of the session. So yeah, we're going here and on server. We might have a condition that allows us to change name, for example, only before the match starts, or this could be a picking of a team. So you would go team A or team B, and then we will go on server and say, hey, I want to be team A. And then we are checking with game mode, and game mode says like, yeah, like, sorry, mate, but team A is full. You have to be team B. And then assigns you to team B, either you want it or not, because that's what the auto assigner would do. And what we do here, we are getting the game mode, and you can get game mode anywhere. So just game mode, get game mode. Just like you can get game instance, and just get game instance. You can run it in absolutely any object, into the UI, into the pound, into the controller, anywhere you want. And you can refer to them. However, remember that game mode exists only on the server. It doesn't exist on the even on the owner of this player controller, but this event is being executed on the server, so we have a guarantee that get name is valid, so we don't have to do a valid check. Okay, it's always valid. Game mode must exist. And then we are running a function that is part of the game mode base, which is a parent of game mode, that's setting change name controller self. So your controller in, I think, default, no, in variables, let's see, player controller, oh come on, it has to be somewhere. Okay, it's not a variable per se, but it exists. So basically you can change the name of a controller, and you are pushing the new name, and you are on server printing the name change to and this name, and you just printing it out, and you are also notifying like, yeah, name change. And yeah, so this is a standard event, and you can see interfaces. There is a, well, this is obviously an interface call, which is event try set name, but there is a second one, which is the, oh yeah, obviously we also use this. This is copied from the top-down controller because we just need it for aim offset. So yeah, obviously we copied that as well. We are not using any of those. And player controller, try set name and get name. And to get name, we are getting the player state. And this is a variable that you just have here, and it is a hard reference to, well, player state object. And every player controller has a player state. And player state is being replicated to all clients. So all clients don't see each other's controllers. And controllers have this limited replication because they need to do whatever calculations, whatever inputs, whatever replication they are running, they need to do it really fast. So they don't have time to bother with replication of, variables that you want to set up here. They need to handle more important tasks like actual gameplay, and they cannot be slowed down by any logic that you are programming inside the player controller. So that's where the player state comes in. Player state holds scoring, it holds, maybe inventory, something that is, well, player state. So for example, player state holds the name. So from player state, you can get player name, and you can push it to this get name interface call. So anyone, well, basically the server, can go into a player controller and say, hey, get name, and he will get the name, or he can go to the controller, and from the controller he can get, hey, player state, what is your name? Get player name. Okay, thank you, this is the name of this player. And from the controller or from the player state, you can always get all the names of all the players. And any player can get name of any player from the game state, but he cannot refer to the player controller, so he has to get the player states itself somehow, and we'll discuss on it how to get it. Okay. And let's get back into event graph, and I think this is all. We're just changing the name. This is a very super simple example of how you can run different functions. You can run change name only on game mode, and you can get name only on player state, but you can access those objects basically anywhere, and this is one of the examples that you can. And let's go into examples, and in the examples, okay, so you have the cheat manager that we already discussed, and cheat manager is a subclass of our controller. just like camera manager. Get player camera manager. This is also an object that is the same as get player camera manager, but this is getting camera manager of a very specific player. And yes, you could specify an index of a player in game mode. So for example, you could inside game mode decide that you want to run a camera shake, force a camera shake on a player as a server because I don't know, reasons, like you can do that. So you can get state player state, obviously, and player state got the player ID, and this is basically the same. So you could get an array of player states and pair this player state. You can get the ID, and for that ID you can get the player camera manager, and you can do that on a server, and you can do stuff that is local player, just you can also do the HUD. You can get HUD of a player controller. That is also a server can get a HUD of a player controller, and the HUD exists basically only on the owning player, but the server can actually push an event that would execute on owning client, and it would execute something on the HUD on that owning client. So yeah, there are just some references that you can always find and always use. So here's the cheat manager, and yeah, cheat manager is freaking awesome. Yeah, the full game doesn't have cheat manager, but you can force the cheat manager by the function construct cheat manager, and you obviously have the cheat manager class, and you have self as a controller. So if you don't run this node in a full build, you will not have access to the cheat manager functions, and you probably want to skip that unless it is important for your game in some way. Okay, now this is a read-only value. You cannot set it, so player is waiting. You see, you only get. You don't get a set. It is not exposed to blueprints because I don't know reasons, and it doesn't change anything if we have context sensitivity or not. It is a protected value, so it cannot be exposed, and it cannot be, you can't do anything. You can't change the default. This is being set by a higher level of this is being set by functions. This is being set by game mode. This is being set by the lifespan of the game itself. But you can read this value, and you can read this value anywhere. So you get controller, and you can just player is waiting. So yeah, you can just access it. This is cool. Like most, the third-person example character, for example, it has 2 extra variables for the mouse sensitivity. Boom! You don't need to worry about that. You just should get the, inside. Oh, where is it? Okay, let's open a character class, because inside the character class you can get controller, and this gets the pound controller. Yeah. And you can cast to player controller. This is a C++ function, so the cast is, you know, less expensive, but I would run it on tick anyway. And from here, that you have a player controller, you can now input your scale. Set input your scale. You can, for example, set it to -2 instead of 2.5, and it will affect all the inputs. I mean, all the inputs that you have here. It will be affected by this. So those are very cool variables. You should definitely start using them. And yeah, like I said, you can get the player state from player controller. It can be any player controller. It can be the local player controller. Remember that if you are a client, not a server, get player controller 0 is guaranteed to give the player controller that you have, and it's always valid. This get player controller index 0 is not valid only on dedicated server, because the dedicated server, even though it has a game mode, it has a game instance, it doesn't have a controller at all. And when you have an array of all the controllers on the server is not an entity that is taking part of the game. It is not in sessions filling up the first spot on the server, and it doesn't have a controller. It's not being used anywhere. So yeah, this is valid everywhere except of dedicated server. So yeah, that's our controller, and it just does this name and get name and try set name, and that's it. Let's go into, yeah, why not? Let's go into game mode itself. And game mode itself is going to be a lot, honestly, to discuss. And I don't know if I should start with what we are actually doing. No, let's start with the examples. Oh no, let's start with this. This is fairly simple in compared to the examples, honestly. So we will start here. Okay, so there is a bunch of functions. Most of them are actor functions, so they're like end play, destroy, begin play, blah blah blah. You don't have to touch them. They're just like you inherit them because game mode is an actor, so obviously it inherits everything. But it also inherits some of the stuff from game mode base. And yeah, well, this is an interface call, obviously, and there are uh, three game mode base that are not being used by me, but I am also overwriting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 functions already. So there are 10, 11, 12. Yeah. So there are 12 functions for override, and if you don't override them, they do stuff. They do stuff that you see and you use and you don't even know. So basically, when you hit play on a map, what they do, they are checking if there is they are, for example, checking if the match should start, and it is by default always true. So it is just starting the match immediately. So it is changing the game state from I don't remember the proper naming. I think I have it here somewhere. Match state. Yeah. So it has an entering map when the map is loading. Then it has waiting to start before, well, it triggers to start. So if you don't change anything in the game mode, if I delete everything, it will just be waiting to start true. So it will start the match and it will then check in progress, and in progress it will stay until forever because we haven't specified when the match is about to end. And if we did specify it, then it goes into match ended, and you can obviously add your custom game states that are doing some other things. In the interface, I don't think we are actually, yeah, we are not implementing those because it doesn't make any sense to run them on game mode, and no one will ever call get name on a game mode, obviously, unless we want to get name of the. Oh yeah, we could actually do something in the dedicated server. So if it's not dedicated server, it means it is oh, I haven't seen this node. This is interesting. You have to add it to the examples as well, and it will be part of the sessions. No, it will be part of matches. Boom. Okay, let's get back here. Where were I? Ah, yeah, get name. So if we are dedicated server, true, then it is just none. But if it's not, then we get player controller. Boom, 0, so the host. Get game state. I mean player state. Get player state. Name. Get player name. And this is his name. And we could, from game mode, we could get the name of the server. Because why not? We just can. I don't know why, but it could work. Okay, let's go back here. So if you don't have anything set up, it is starting the options, it is going through all that stuff I said, and it will never hit match ended. It will just stay in progress, and then it will spawn all players. So all the windows, everyone that you are here adding, they will spawn. And what it will do, it will get all actors of class player start, and it will take the first one and it will just spawn everyone on the it will try to spawn everyone at the player start, the first one on the level, and it will spawn the default pawn class, and that's it. Like, this is happening and this is what we are setting up right now, but we are making some changes to it. So now when we log in, so when any controller, even even as us, when someone logs in to the server, so if we have the listen option on the map and someone connects to our server, this happens, and when someone gets disconnected by any mean, any error, this happens. So okay, yeah, other way around, this is the logout. So on post login, you getting the this is a variable I've added, so all players, and it doesn't have to be exposed. All players, we are adding unique new player controller object reference, because we can still get all players, but to get all players from game mode, we have to get game instance, and from game instance we are getting all players. No, not game instance. Game. Yeah, no. Jesus. Game state. Yeah. So we're getting the get game state. And from the game state, we can get players. Get player array. And this is also a default value of the game state that we'll discuss, but it contains player state objects, not player controllers. So we can get a reference or get a copy, and then we can get controller. And Christ, that takes forever, right? So that's why we are just saving those controllers for easy and fast access here. We're just adding unique to this one. We don't have to set replicate or anything. Remember, this exists only on server. It has nothing to replicate to no one. There's no point. And we're just saying, oh, player joined, and it will show only on the server. And when someone logs out, we are checking if it was a player controller, if it wasn't a player controller, because you see, you have functions that are adding bots, and bots can control not only just some random creeps, they can control the default pawn class, like in Left 4 Dead when someone goes AFK for a very long time. Actually, a bot is taking over for his character, so there is a bot that is being logged in and he takes control of the pawn that is being AFK. And we're saying that, yeah, a bot came in and he's like doing his stuff. But then the player comes back, push any keys, and the bot gets kicked. And we check, and we are just kicking the bot, and the bot gets disconnected. And when we say, oh yeah, bot removed, screw that guy, and we are again taking this pawn that is now not controlled by anyone, say, oh yeah, this AFK guy is now controlling the pawn. So there's a function for that as well. But what we are doing, we're just getting all the players right here. And yeah, on remove, we are just removing an object, which is like this object, because there's also a player controller, so we have to cast to player controller. We don't have other choice, because this could be any controller reference. And then event onset match state. So this is one of the override functions. When the match state changes, I try to find a way to control it in blueprints. I think it's not really fully exposed to blueprints, but you can read this value and it has some defaults, and those are the four I know that exist, and you can do switch on it and you can just do stuff. When the match state changes, I just make a notification and then I do stuff. So when the match changes to in progress, and when that happens, we'll talk in a second. What we do is we're going to spawn all players. So we're posting a notification for server only, obviously, that we are spawning all players, and we are running a loop for each. And for each of those players controllers, we can run a function that is a game mode based function. So this is another function that is native to this object, and we'll discuss all of them here. Those are all native functions to, well, basically game mode. And see if this player can restart. And why couldn't he restart? Well, for example, in the default values, you have a minimum respawn delay. And if someone died, then you can run a function that's saying that, yeah, player restart. So player restart at player start or at specific transform. So you can make, for example, player restart at his corpse, or like in World of Warcraft, he can run nearby his corpse, and when he's in range, so then player can restart. You do player restart at transform, and the transform is his ghost spawn. Or you can restart player at player start and restart player at player start. Um, Also requires an actor of a start spot. And how to get this actor? Well, you run another function, and so on and so on. But you don't have to make those functions yourself. You can just override functions that are here, and sometimes just overwriting few of those functions, like ready to start or ready to end match. You don't have to overwrite all of them, but that will be probably a good point if you want to do something more complex. You can get what you want really fast, actually. So we're checking if player can restart, and we're actually not doing, but yeah, why not? Let's do it a bit differently. Let's make this branch. Why not? Like if he can restart. So first of all, print if he can restart, and if he can restart, then unpossess whatever he has, because he might have a pawn that is for example, a spectator. So we want to unpossess this spectator, and this spectator pawn, if it is unpossessed, for a few seconds the garbage collector will collect it and destroy, and you don't have to worry about removing it from the memory. Yay! And then after unpossessing, you're doing a restart player at transform. And how do you get this transform, or how do you restart player at player start, right? You can do one or the other. So how do you get that? Well, you have a function which is called find player start, and find player start. Yeah. So the function find player start. It has an incoming name. This function already existed. I overwritten it. Normally, what it would do, it would it would basically do what I've did because it would find the network player start all objects and it would find the first one in the array. So it would go a for each loop with break that matches this name, and this name is this player start tag. So I've done this just to show that you can overwrite it and do some, your own stuff. But it would work almost the same, at least in my location. But the thing is, like, if you have a map that has control points, let's say it has 5 control points that are consequent to each other, right? And whatever is the control point that your team collected recently is the one that you can spawn at. So each of those points, they have tags that are being changed. So this is team A, this is team A, and this is team A. But this is the most relevant one, the new one, the one that you want. And this is the one that is relevant to this team, this specific character class, for example. And you need to have your custom logic. You can run this logic here and you can find this point based on tags, based on, your def location, so you can pick the nearest one, or it can be picked based on, different things. So what I'm doing here, I'm just taking the player state, checking if he's spectator. If he's a spectator, then I am getting all players start and doing this loop with break when we are looking for a player start that has player start tag spectator start. So it's this one, I think. And yeah, if we find it, it say, oh yeah, start spawn here. This is the object that we want to spawn at. And on completed, it goes here. And if we are not a spectator, then we're going here and doing again a loop. And we are checking if the thing that we pushed, the name, is the player start tag on this player start object, and if it is, then spawn here. And if spawn here is valid, so we actually found a point, then return spawn here, so the start location here. And if we haven't found a point, then we are just getting the all player start location. We're just getting the first one, the closest one, and we don't bother with checking of tags or anything like this, and we just spawn here and return node. Okay. And this is all event graph. So yeah, so we're making a random team selection. So we're either team A or team B, and you are picking at random, and it is randomly assigning those start locations to players. And it's getting this start location transform. So like I said, it's also taking the scale. Please remember to check the scale. If you take this scale and you spawn your default pawn with this scaling, it will break completely. And reset player at transform. Let's go here. And reset player at transform is basically spawn default pawn at transform. So what it does, it just spawn actor, default pawn class. Like this is, again, I am doing this. I could delete this function, all the override, run the game, and it would do the same thing. I'm just showing you how you can, modify it. So for example, when you are spawning the default class, you are also checking you have a component on the class, and this component is inventory component, and this inventory component has to take the inventory of your dead character and update it by the experience points that or something, right? So you can do this logic here. Whenever you respawn, you can do some logic. So for example, it could I don't know. you could just do something when spawning new player, and it always runs with authority. So if you code any logic for entering shops, applying experience points or anything like that, you might make a mistake and leave some backdoor for hackers inside the object. But if you code it here, if you load save game objects and initialize inventories and do stuff in game mode, there's absolutely no way for anyone to access this object because it doesn't exist on their side. And you can still run events with authority on the component, and you can set variables directly with authority. So you can set up any replicated variables from here. Okay, so we talked about onset match state, and if the match state is in progress. So when the hell does this trigger? When we know that entering map is loading the level. Okay, that makes sense. Waiting to start. Waiting to start is just the default after entering the map. But those two, match ends and in progress, how the hell do we access those? Well, there is a function that I overwritten which says ready to start match. And basically, if you don't override this function, you just leave it as is, it will just return true. And that's it. Ready to start true. Now, it spawns all the default bounds at default start points, and yeah, that's it. But you can make a custom one. So for example, I have a 4-player cooperation game and it requires a full lobby to start the game. So you're getting the player number. If it's above 4, then you return, if it is 4, so it is full, or you might have more than 4 players. So you can have a lobby of 4, but allow 20 connections. And that would mean that the first 4 players, when they connect, they will have assigned, they will not get a pawn immediately because we don't spawn pawn immediately. Whatever basic behavior you have, like now, if I run it locally as one player, yes, save everything. Yeah, we are a spectator pawn and we cannot move, we can't do anything. We have this lobby UI and we can just change name server and that's it. We cannot do anything else. So we don't have any pound spawned. But once the 4th player connects, all 4 players will get through this and they all will get assigned a pound. And then all those pounds, when they die, they just push to the game mode and saying, hey, with authority, like I died. Okay, so you have a custom event inside the pound that says die, and on die it does something, and then it leads to another event that says die server cleanup. And this one runs on server only, and on server only it will just go and game mode and says, yeah, try to restart player at player start, or just, you know what, at default player start, so just restart player, please. And you are running it from a player character. So you would run those functions inside the player characters. You already have a character class and you just get controller, and this controller just goes as a reference here, and you see this like this, and you see this reference will be valid for the server, it will not be valid for anyone else. And if you try to cheat and if you try to restart the player somehow, for example before the timer, because you have this default class 10-second minimum respawn, the server always will go like, can player restart? And gosh, yeah, so it it will go like this, like this, like this, and like this, and like this. And that's it. And if it doesn't, then you could, for example, you know, you get the drift. You could make a, you know, delay, or you could make a timer, and then you could check every 1 second if this player can restart. If he can restart, then boom, go and restart, do something. Okay. So yeah, we are just taking 4 players, no more than that. And once we spawn those 4 players, and once we are using the restart player, once we are using this to restart players that died, every other player after the 4th one will join as a spectator. And the spectator can use the view target. And the player controller that is a spectator, he can use the set view target with blend to active player pawns, and he can you know, observe them from their perspective, and he can also change the cameras, do stuff, because the cameras, they are not replicated, they are being run on the client. So if you have a button that is changing the view from first person to third person, the spectator can do it as well, and he can watch you from first person, from third person, or you can have another camera that allows him to spin the camera around the character freely, like in Left 4 Dead. This is a feature that you don't have while controlling the character itself. And then he can switch view with blend or without blend, because you can also just set view target. I think. Oh no, but you can just have blend times 0. So this is without blend then. And you can, you know, observe next player. So you can, for example, run an event on server next spectate or something. And then you run on server and you get game instance, and you then, or you just get all player states, and from player states you get the controllers, and or even from the player states you get the pawns, and from the pawns you just watch them. So 4 players joins the game, the rest are spectating. I have a limit of a server of 4 players, so everyone is playing, but yeah, they manually would not restart unless I made a specific functions that allow them to restart. So, okay, let's go through everything. Can spectate. Okay, so this, for example, is taking the viewer, which is a player controller, so a player controller that is a spectator, obviously, and you're taking the view target. So for example, in Counter-Strike, depending on the server options, you can only view your own team. You cannot try to spectate enemy players unless the server allows it. So I am always returning true, but you could lock spectating or free camera, or spectating certain surveillance cameras that are set up in the map, or anything like that. You know, with limitations. For example, if you have a map that requires control of 2 teams, you can only spectate certain points only where your team control those points, and you have a free view around those points, left, right, up, and down, like a surveillance camera. But you cannot, you know, surveil regions that you cannot spawn at, or, you know, view. So this is one. Choose player start. This is similar to find player start. Find player start is being used when you find player start. Let me see. Event graph. Player start. Oh yeah, context sensitive. On event on restart player. Okay. Okay, so this is the find player start. So this and choose player start. Well, I don't really know. Choose. Yeah, this is probably something that is not. This is something that's probably not exposed to blueprints, and you cannot do this from blueprints itself. It doesn't have an input like find player start has a string input. This one doesn't have one. It just takes from player. So I guess player start could be referencing to some reference inside the player controller or player state. I'm not really sure, but this is the one I coded just because reasons, but we are using find player start. You could leave this one empty. I won't delete it. Normally I would delete it and leave it in game empty if I am not using it, just in case, because I don't know how it's being used, and just leave this one. But for the sake, like, this is an example that I want you to download and enter and check every blueprint, how they are set up. I will leave it be. Okay, find player start we already discussed. Must spectate. Okay, this is funny. So we're, for example, saying that must spectate. No. Or we could say must spectate if match is in progress. Or has match started. And what is the difference? Match in progress and match started? Um, okay. Okay. So this triggers immediately when match start event triggers. So whenever ready to start match, when this hits true, this one triggers immediately. Uh, okay, let's close those because it's getting confusing as hell. Uh, yeah, yeah, I don't need those two as well. I don't need this. Okay, so must spectate. So has match started. This happens immediately, but this gives true when this match state is being changed. And match state, it can change later than the match starts. So for example, when you hit ready to start, you can have a countdown that when this changes, it goes a countdown of 1 minute. Prepare everyone to start the match, give them notifications, and then boom, it starts. And when it starts, it changes to in progress. And now it is in progress. And if it is in progress, no one new can not spectate. But probably when the countdown starts, you already want the match. You already want to force everyone else to spectate, or any player ID above 0, 1, 2, 3. So 4 players has to spectate. But yeah, let's say that this one. This was the must spectate. And must spectate. This is annoying because you can force a player controller to spawn a spectator, but you cannot then change it back not to spectator. That's let me explain. Sessions player controller. I think it's spec. No. Oh no, it was in the player state. So player state is the least exposed one that has the least things that you can actually do with. So variables, and we're looking for is spectator. So is spectator is read only. Get is spectator, and you can only get. You cannot set it, and I have no idea how to set that. And this basically is always giving us true. Is a bot. This is also annoying as hell because you can like program a player controller to act as a bot but still be a player controller. So by any game logic, it's being treated as a player, and it can run any player functions, any player controller functions. Um, but it can be an AI controlled player per se. Also, any AI controller we have is a bot set to true immediately, and you cannot change this value as well. And we'll get back to it in a second. Okay, so we're doing this. Must spectate, ready to end match. So we are ready to end match if, first of all, we have players. The player array is not empty. Okay, if it is empty, then definitely we are not ready to end match. If it's not greater than 0, yeah, okay. So for all players, we are getting the okay, so we're getting the game state. Like I said, game state holds by default the array of player states, and player state has certain default values, and one of those values is score, and score is just a float value, and that's it. And you can add score, remove score, doesn't matter. But you can also read this value, and if any of the players hits 100 score, someone wants. And yeah, we have a winner name, so we're reading the name of this guy that has 100 score, and then we are saving the winner name in this is not local, I guess. Oh, it's local. Okay, it shouldn't be a local variable, it should be just a variable. And on completed, we're saying that yeah, someone won, it is true, so it means that yeah, we should end the match. And on default, no one wins, so yeah. And from here, break. Forgot this one. Okay. Okay. So yeah, if someone hits 100 score, we close the session, ready to end match. And by end match, it doesn't mean, you know, disconnect all players and screw this game. It, for example, can freeze time, can set the time dilatation to 0, pause the game completely, you know, despawn everything, run a cinematic, display a score for every player that you can also run from here, just get all players, and you can just, you know, on match end. So basically on match ended, you can get you can, you know, just get all players, and you can push them the notification screen who won, what was the score, and a countdown for the server reset or for the server to close. And when the server closes, it can just restart, and new players can connect to the new session that we created. Okay, and let's go further. This is the must spectate, ready to end match, ready to start match. Like I said, if we have at least 4 players, should reset actor to reset. So any actor, we can check if this actor should reset. I'm not really exactly sure where this is being called, so let's read. Functions determine when an actor should have reset code when the game has reset code on it. Okay, so we can make a check if an actor can reset. So it looks like this. Yeah, it looks like this. So that's probably it. And we are always returning true. But we can have a, you know, cooldown that it's not only taking the 10 seconds we have here in the default settings, but we could, for example, like in Dota 2, say that yeah, the bigger the level you have, the greater the experience, and the longer the game lapse is, the longer it takes for you to reset. So there would be a timer, and until this timer finishes, and for example, it is invalidated and returns nothing, or there's a variable that's replicated saying yes, you can reset. You can read this value from this actor, and you could have a notification blueprint interface message that would just ask a question like, can he reset really? And would have a boolean here, and you just connect it here, and that's it. So should reset, yeah, we just set it to true. Spawn default pound add transform, and spawn default pound 4. And this is the, like, you have those two reset spawns. One is at actor and one is at transform. We are using the transform one. So we just have a spawn actor, which is the default pawn class, collision default, owner is the controller, obviously, instigator, well, itself, because that's a pawn reference. And then you just possess by this controller when we don't do anything else, and that's it. And this, we don't use it anywhere, but we could set it up as well, and that would be pretty simple, because we would take this, boom, but yeah, start spot, get transform, and split. And for example, we don't want to, we for example want to have the scale always 1 1 1. So we just ignore the scale, and yeah, this is our custom spawning at start point. That's it. Okay. Those are my interface calls, so we can skip that. There's nothing more to it, and just one variable, and that's it. So I've just done all this overwritten, and what it controls, it has a lobby functionality that until 4 players, we do not start the match. When there are 4 players, we can start the match, and it has a different match state. And actually on match state, we can dynamically change the game state object that we'll discuss in a second. But we can use the same game state. We don't have to have a lobby game state and a session game state, for example. I don't see a point in that, but you can. And you can change them at runtime without reloading the map. This is one of the few few objects that are specified in game mode that you can change. And like you can see, when you spawn default pawn, I am spawning default pawn, but I could as easily overwrite it to spawn a different pawn, and I could, doesn't matter what someone says in here, I could spawn a pawn, different pawn for the host, so for the player 0, for example, if his index is 0, that I am spawning, like in those asymmetric games, when you have like this one evil overlords and 4 players that are trying to survive whatever he's throwing at them, you could have this spawn logic, because you can have 2 different pawns in game mode in default values. You just have one default pawn class, but you can override this default pawn class by putting something different. You can have a select, and this select has a wildcard, and this wildcard is if player index game player state index no ID. Yeah, so if this ID, boom, if this ID is equal 0, bam, I have to change that. Select. So if it is a player, so it is, if it is fall, everyone gets some pawn. Or you have, this asymmetric with classes, and you have different classes, and you don't want to code 4 classes in a single pawn. Those are 4 pawns. You can change that. You can do it here without any problem. And by the way, this is just saying instigator, because if you don't spawn a pawn, you have to specify an instigator, but if it is a pawn class or a character class, instigator can be empty. Any other actor you spawn, you should mention what the instigator is. Okay, I will leave that here as an example. Okay, so let's go into examples, and it's gonna be huge. So let's go into sessions. So those are the Epic Games, default sessions. And you have the create session, which has a player controller, which is the host of this session, and it is also the player zero of this session. And creating a session already makes a session object, and it already connects you to the matchmaking services and to the server. And if there would be no connection to the internet, that would already trigger an error. So you can, but just using this, you can start debugging and finding errors directly from the start of your working. You can use your local network mask, and it will look for connections and open port only on your local network IP. Or you can use your outside IP that is being used on the internet, and it will find internet players. And you allowed, well, public connections limit, which is a limit not of players but of connections. So you can have players and you can have spectators. And if you have, you have some widget that allows you to configure how many players, how many spectators. You could have like, you can have player number, which is 4, and spectators number, which is, I don't know, 10. You just add those numbers, and spectators plus players is this, and you can have it dynamic. Whenever you click host, you can have inputs, values that specify if you have a LAN game or not, all that stuff. And this goes just directly on the trigger. On success and failure, we already discussed. Destroy session, like I said, for a player controller. If you join a session, you have a session inside your player controller. And by the way, player controller, does it have a session? No, it just have events. It doesn't have a session reference, and that's sad. But you could store a reference to a session when you could do the find session. So when you connect join session, you could store this reference, but I am not sure. I am really not sure if it will stay inside your memory or it will be cleared by your garbage collector. And on this session, online sessions, you can only join, get server name, get ping, get... Okay, so for example, if you store session as a reference, you could get ping at tick, but you would probably be kicked for doing DDoS on the server. But yeah, you could every one in a while, so for example, every 10 seconds, check ping to the server. And yeah, why not? Yeah, destroy session, it flashes, it destroys all the sessions on this controller. So either you joining or you creating, it will destroy it. On success, on failure, we already discussed that. Find sessions, it is joining the Epic Games matchmaking system, which is part of the net subsystem, which is different than the net subsystems team. And once again, I think I will have to do another tutorial on the advanced sessions. It will be a shorter one because we already discussed many things, and it will just cover those nodes and not much more than it. And they will be more complicated, but they will make your life a lot easier because they will also allow dedicated server to be spawned directly from blueprints. Right now, if you want a dedicated server, you have to run a command line with the dash server, and you have to open a specific map with the listen option, and you have to, just make a shortcut to your game properly created. Or if you want to make a build of a dedicated server, then you actually have to prepare your launcher, and you have to download the source code launcher, and you have to recompile it, which means you have to copy and recompile every marketplace plugin as well, which means that you have to change the target CS files inside your project, and it's a general giant pain in the butt. Trust me, like the first time I was setting up a proper build dedicated server, that took me, I think, 3 days. It was a shitty PC, I must say, so recompiling the engine itself took like 6 hours. On this machine with 24 CPU cores, I think that would be maybe less than 40 minutes. But still, there's multiple things you can do wrong, and it will compile and compile and compile. I give you an error by the end of it. Okay, and on session object, you can get current players, max players, ping, and server name, and you cannot change any of those once the session was created. So yeah, you can only change the max players on create session, and that's it. What you can call anywhere in any object. This is just part of the standard library in Unreal Engine. You can check if you are running a dedicated server, and you can have different logic if you are a dedicated server. You can check if you are a server, which means that you are a host. So if you are in the main menu and you're not running any networking, you are the server. Because what it's checking if you have authority. If you created a session and you are the only person inside this session and you haven't traveled to any map with listen option, you are still a server. You can get the game name, and the game name is being read from the ini files and from the project settings. You can get the platform name, and platform name will be always whatever you are developing at. So this would give me Windows no matter what, unless I make a build that is a targeted build. So, then it will give you the platform name. Game bundle ID is, like I said, the GUID of your game. This I think it is changing when you are recompiling stuff. Get current level name, and you can remove prefix string. Prefix string is the folder basically. So this will get you either the full path to the level or it will get you just the level name, and that might be useful if you want to reopen a level. But there is actually a there's a function for this. It is somewhere out there. I will discuss it later. So yeah, you can get the current level name, and you can, for example, well, in advanced sessions, you can also add an extra string with extra settings, and you could push the map level into these settings, and you could then have a server explorer, and inside the server explorer, you could read the map names, and the map names will be taken from here. You can always get game instance, game state, game mode. You can obviously get the controller, and you can get the player state from the player controller. So yeah, you have access to all game mode, and yeah, obviously you can get okay, game mode is here. You can get instigator of a pawn, and instigator can be null on multiple objects. It doesn't matter. It should. It is a very good practice to set instigator as the pawn that the player is controlling, not the weapon. I mean, you could set the weapon, but you should set it to pawn because there is a get instigator controller, and this is taking the instigator controller. So if it is a pawn, it has a valid controller, and you can always call those functions directly without doing some casts, without, you know, instead of using 5 nodes to get to the instigator, which is a controller, you could just have 1 node. So just keep it in mind. That's a quality of life advice from me. And yeah, you can get match state, and you can do this switch on match state name, like I showed, and we are actually using this here. And this is event on set match state, so this will trigger not on tick, it will just trigger when it changes. But you can just, whenever you need to, so for example, a new player is connecting to your server, and you are then checking what is the match state, and you are displaying, oh man, sorry, it's not in lobby, you can only be a spectator because reasons. So you can read it anywhere. The match itself. Return to main menu host. This is just a disconnecting all players and loading the default map. So this is going to your project setting maps and it's getting the game default map. And game default map in its script, it could go, for example, like, oh, I am at a, like I said, in the game mode, in the lobby game mode, that I said that it will not work with those sessions. It would work with advanced sessions. That it will go to return to main menu host, and it goes to the map, and the game mode goes, oh, but I am a dedicated server, then I am immediately starting a new session, opening slots, and loading the map again. So yeah, there you go. Start match. So this basically you can trigger it manually and it is overwriting ready to start match. It will ignore it. It will just start match immediately. So in Left 4 Dead, for example, the match starts when 4 players click their ready triggers, but the host can always force start the match even if the players are not ready. So this is what this does. End match. Yeah, so this is basically from InProgress to waiting post match. Oh, okay, waiting post match. Yeah, so from InProgress, you're going to waiting post match, and in waiting post match, you are displaying the winner, you are displaying the score, winner, winner, chicken dinner, all that bullshit. And when timer ends, it hits match end, and match end, for example, goes to it will go into return to main menu host. And from main menu host, it returns back to this map and initialize the entire process from the start again. So this is a way to make the life cycle go round, and your server has a session time, for example, a map time that you have to complete or anything, or all the players disconnected. It goes like, okay, I don't have any players, the match is in progress, everyone left, no one will jump in their place, return to main menu and restart, or just, end match. Abort match is whoa, this is forcing an error. I have no idea why would you use that, but I guess if you have any idea why would you abort match with an error, forcing error, then write in the comments. I'm wondering, maybe there's a good example of a game that is doing an abort match like this. So, oh yeah, actually, we could, for example, check if we have, if we are running run on RAM on the server, because a single server machine, it can run as many instances of our dedicated server as we want. Uh, for example, some of the games that are running dedicated servers in Unreal, they are running up to 4 dedicated servers per single core of a processor. So they are running on a big machine, a few dozens of servers. And if the machine is getting slow and it's running around out of memory, it could want to kill matches without killing the process of the game. So when there is again more memory, it could restart. But as long as as long as it's not handling all the traffic or the internet traffic, it will abort matches and it will stop the life cycle of your game until you start it again. Has match started, is match in progress, get match state. This is the one that we are using. Has match ended. You can read them from game mode base and game mode. Delayed start. Delayed start is basically overwriting the ready to start match. And so when the ready to start match hits, it will not start immediately. Okay, restart game. So that's basically reloading the level, but I'm not sure if it's reloading with the listen value, and it is not really restarting the session. So this, like in Left 4 Dead, you could have a vote of restart level, and it will not kick any players. It will not change characters they picked. It will just reload the level you are at, and it will spawn everyone by default at their default starting points with no inventory. Everything will be set to default values and the map will start again. So when the game ends, you could also do a restart game. So it's like, oh yeah, stay a while and we'll move to next map or reload this one. Okay, use seamless travel. That requires a different setup and that requires an extra transition map, which should be an empty map, and that requires a proper lobby and session map, and that would require a command line that's doing a, oh my god, how did it go? Server travel, yeah. There's a command server travel, and this is basically loading a level, and it is forcing every player that you have authority over to follow you into this new level through level streaming, so it is seamless. Okay, so start player as spectator, set to yes, and pauseable, the game is not pauseable. If it is pauseable, any player can pause the game. And you can pause the game for everyone, for you to, just to be clear on that. And the server can always pause the game, but this allows players to pause the game. Okay, so this is the matches, now player. Get num players. This is the game mode function. It's giving you how many players there are, so you don't have to get all players length. You don't have to do that. You just run this function and you know that there are number of players. You can also read those default values that you have here in variables that are game mode. There's some of those. So you can get how many players, how many bots, how many spectators, and how many traveling players. So traveling players is part of this seamless travel. So how many players are actually loading right now? So how many players are traveling with the server? Restart player is, restarting the player. So, so it's probably using this on restart player. Restart players are player start and a transform already covered. It's those two. Player can restart. It's reading a value for player controller if he can restart, and he might have some logic inside that doesn't allow him to be restarted. Find player start. This is also here. Find player start. We are overwriting that. And remove player is, well, basically kick. So you are removing someone from the session. You are disconnecting his player from your server, his player controller, and you can destroy pawn, or you can then assign this pawn to a bot. And yeah, that's it for the player. And now this node, open level, you can open level by name. So it is very good for you not to name maps the same. It doesn't matter if you have, level 1 in different words or something. If you write level 1 here, it will be a clusterfuck. You should name all levels differently. You can also load levels absolute, so you can specify folders. If true options are rested, if false options from current level. Okay. Okay, so you can take the levels from this level. So if we had a level that said listen, it is true, then options are reset. If it's not, then open level will open this level with my options, but it will also take the options we have right now. So for example, listen. And you can also give those options. And what can I do with those options? They are just some random string, right? Well, not exactly. You can get this option string, and it is game mode. And it is reading from the level how it was open. It is being stored in the game mode directly. And you can parse option, and you can use the key. It is basically like HTML header parsing. So you have key equals value, which is a wildcard, and then question mark, which means that there is another option key, and another equals value. So yeah, you have my option value, and I am parsing it to integer, and I am checking my another key, which is a string, and I am pushing it as a name, for example. And I can use those. So I could have max bots, I don't know, and max bots is 3. And now if I have 3 bots, it will no longer start filling. So if I have a game that is 16 versus 16, the max bots I can have is 3. And any other slot unfilled by a player will not be filled by a bot because reasons. Okay, event initialize HUD for player. It's just taking the controller of the player, and it is running an initialize HUD for that player. That's it. And you can do some stuff on the server. So if you are running, there are some really cool UI on the marketplace that allows you to access HUD directly through multiplayer. So you could just get free here, get HUD, and you could do stuff on it. Change name. This is also a game mode function, and you can change name of a controller. I know this should be a controller function because you can run authority functions on the controller, so why bother? But this makes extra, effort that only the server can change the name. And if we click this, this will trigger, and it will just say that, hey, this controller has this new name and it has been changed on us. So this was true or false. And we can, for example, announce it, and we can push to game state that some player changed his name to something, or we added a title, or we added a team name to his name, or so he's now, client one exclamation mark team A, something like that, whatever. Okay. Event on swap player controller. So swap controller. Okay, this is another thing that's not exposed to blueprints. That's a shame. That allows you to swap controllers on a pound, so you can get old player controller and get new player controller. They can switch pounds they are controlling, and there's a function on that, but you can't call it from from blueprints, and that could also help with you with setting bots that are taking over for AFK players. Now there are event dispatchers on restart player. So when a player is being restarted, so we are running restart player, we have an event dispatcher. We can bind this event dispatcher inside player controller, for example, and this event dispatcher will be triggered with authority. So it can't be triggered on local player, but it can run locally, so you can do something and just uh, hide your score UI, for example, that you seen when you were dead, and now you are not dead. You are back into action, and you want to hide this UI. um, init start spot. Okay, rested player at player start. So when we are running this, this is also being triggered, and we can also bind this event somewhere else. So for example, in player state or in player controller, just like this event dispatcher. Okay, so this is the game mode. It's a great shame that there are multiple functions that are not being used in blueprints or can't be called in blueprints. I wonder why that is. I will try to look into it more and see if there are any better examples of how to use it. And yeah, I will push all of this, for you guys to check out and play with it. So let's look into other classes. We don't have many left. So let's see player state. You already seen the controller. In event graph, I do nothing. In our class default values, I do nothing. In settings, I do nothing. And get name, I'm returning name, but I can return name directly from this object, so it doesn't matter. Try set name is not set because we are just using it in the controller, and that's it. And there are values that you can read. So let's go into examples. Okay. Score. So those are replicated. Anyone can read, server can write, and they can be sometimes written automatically, sometimes not. So you cannot write this, you cannot write into ping, you cannot write into isSpectator, which is bullshit. You cannot write into isAbort, which is bullshit as well. And I think set player. Yeah, you cannot write the player ID because it's being set up from the controller on authority as well. You can only set score. What? Yeah, but not from here. So you can set score from game mode apparently because, well, can I? I mean, huh, I cannot set score. So how the hell do I add score? I don't. That's interesting. So yeah, we got variables that are absolutely useless. In blueprints, we can read those values. Those are really important for a read, but actually only those two really matter. Those can't be changed at runtime, and score can't be changed at runtime by us. So pound private, this is very important. This is a reference to the pound of the controller of the owner of this player state, but this can be read only on authority. So it's not only cannot be set, it can only get, but you can also get it only on the server. And okay, event copy properties and event override with. And why the hell does this object can copy properties from a different player state? Well, that's because if let's go into game mode and default class, and you have here inactive player state lifespan. So if you get disconnected, if your player controller, I don't know, you have a bad router and you get kicked by the player controller, your player controller disconnects, your player state is being stored for 300 seconds inside the game itself on authority, and it can store up to whatever you specify, number of players. So the 16 players that joined in and joined out, their score is being set, their inventory is being stored, their pound selection, so I don't know, character class, everything is being stored within this player state. And if they reconnect before this timer goes to 0, they will have assigned the same player state. And then it will actually make a new player state and it will copy properties from the previous player state that was stored. Because he will take your player controller unique ID, and which is a GUID net unique ID, and it will compare with the new one that is being connected. And if it is already known and it is one of those 16 that is being stored, it will copy the saved inactive player state to your new player state. So yeah, this way you can reconnect to a game within certain window of time and don't lose any progress. So okay, there's that. And let's get to the last one, which is the game state. And in the game state, we have nothing, class default, nothing, because I'm not doing anything here, but you could, in game state, you could follow team score, you could follow session start timer, and you could have a countdown for the game to end. You could store things that are relevant to the, the life cycle of your session. So in here, you, for example, could follow if you are in lobby, if you are selecting characters, if characters were all selected. Like the captain's mode in Dota, you have different game states, and they can be covered by physically different game state objects, but they can have just logic here inside this object that would just change, like match state, previous match state, elapsed time. So when this game state was created, basically, it starts a timer. A reference to the game mode. The reference to the game mode object, because this is just the class and this is the object. The spectator pawn class, which is also being taken from the game mode. And players array, which I already said that contains all the players' states. And this is the proper way for a local player to get, for example, names, avatars, and score of all players. And he shouldn't take the names and the avatars of all players. He should actually go into game state and gets its version of all score, names, avatars, and all players. And the game mode only on server should go through all players and just listen on events and get some interface calls, which is updating the game state itself. In the example, you have the, like I said, match state, previous match state, which are just those values we covered in game mode, and you can read them in the game mode. And in the game state itself, you have the elapsed time, which is value in seconds, I guess. Yeah, I think this is just seconds from the start of the game. And then you have the player array, and that's it. There's everything that is actually, yeah, that's everything that is useful in this thing. And the entire rest you have to code yourself. So here you should store the, you know, the life cycle, basically. Because any player can refer to game state, and game mode has authority over it. So variables here can be, like you can see, replicated, so with authority, and they can be also non-replicated for, I don't know what reason. Replication is the easiest way to do things here, because you could have like a team A score, which is an integer, and it is a replicated with rep notify, and whenever you update team A score, you just get all player array for each loop, and for each you would just get controller, or you could just have an event that runs only on owner. So basically every owner would get an update. Okay. Do we have anything else to cover? I think this is it. I think that's everything. So the last thing we have to do is test what we did here. And host, join, and join, and join. Okay, so it assigned random start location. So this guy got spawned in team B start location, and these three guys got spawned in the team A spawn location. Like I said, we didn't assign teams, we just randomized them. It usually does 2 by 2, that the random is, it's statistically correct most of the times, but this time it was 3 and 1. And you can see I can move with my mouse, I can move with my keyboard, I can change aim, turn in place, and I can do stuff really fast. And it is with lag. We are playing online right now. So it is going through internet and back through internet. So there is actual lag like we would have. If this game was running on my computer and my friend's computer, the latency would be probably similar because it's still going two ways. And if we go into stat unit here and on a client, so the client is running at 2.1, 2.2, 1.9. When I'm moving and aiming and changing states and doing stuff really fast, I can get game to 2.4. But the game on the server, you can see it's going at 2.6 and it can go 2.8 milliseconds on the game. And if multiple people will be doing a lot of really fast stuff, it would be worse than that. But general, it's not hitting performance that much. I am hosting 4 players and it's not a difference really. Like having an alien shooter like this for few players, that would be easy. So yeah, that's basically game mode, game, live state and sessions. And I will try to improve on the blueprints I am pushing right now. And if I find anything cool, and I will make some really cool networking examples, and I will go into those as well. I will just build small multiplayer demos for you guys to play with. I will let you know, and as usual, I will post everything for free on the repository. The link is in the description. And if you like this video, please consider liking it, leaving a comment on what you think I've done good, where I made mistakes. No one doesn't make mistakes. I certainly done few in this video. And consider maybe subscribing and hitting that bell button for notifications if you might. And thank you for listening. I hope you burned with me till the end, and see you guys next time. Bye.